Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear student, Assalamu alaikum. Business Economics ECO 400 के लेक्चर नंबर 23 में खुश आमदीद. वेलकम बैक. जैसे पहले की तरह लेक्चर के पहले हिस्से में we'll talk about the previous lecture, what we have learned in the previous lecture, and then we'll move to the today's lectures and then what we're going to learn in today's class. So briefly overview of the previous lecture. We talked about, as you know, that about the open economy, and within open economy we specifically talked about the exchange rates, and then as we discussed that there are two normally exchange rates in the economy. One is the nominal exchange rate, the other is real exchange rate. Now nominal exchange rate is the price of one country currency in terms of the other country currency, right? So जैसा कि हम बात करते हैं कि if we compare the exchange rate of rupee with dollar, so that is the basically nominal exchange rate, and the real exchange rate basically is the price of country's goods in terms of another country goods. So when we measure the exchange rate in terms of prices of two goods of two different countries, so that will become the real exchange rate. The real exchange rate equals the nominal exchange rate times the ratio of the prices of the two countries, right? So real exchange rate is equal to nominal exchange rate into the ratio of the prices of two countries, P over P star. After that we learned that how the real exchange rate variables is determined, किस तरह से हम determine कर सकते हैं real exchange rate को. We said that net exports are a function of real exchange rate. If other things remain equal, so there is inverse relationship between net exports of a country and the real exchange rate. अगर real exchange rate बढ़ता है, so net exports कम हो जाती हैं, and if real exchange rate goes down, net export will go up. So the real exchange rate basically adjusts to equate the net export with the capital outflow of the economy, right? So as we said that last time, we learned about two different markets. One was the goods market, where we talked about the supply of goods and services, exports of goods and services, and imports of goods and services, and we talked about the net exports. And the second market that we talked about, दूसरी market जिसका हमने जिक्र किया, so that was the financial market, जहाँ पे हमने net capital outflow की बात की, and that was the difference between capital outflow minus capital inflow. Now capital outflow क्या है कि जो foreign investment है, the people resident of the country investing or spending money in foreign countries, that is capital outflow. The foreigners, when they are investing in the domestic country or in the country, so that is called capital inflow. So that capital outflow is the difference between these two capital outflow. So when we talk about the market, the equilibrium in the exchange rate market, so we have to relate these two different markets, that is NX, which is the difference between net exports and imports, is equal to net capital outflow. Then we talked about how the nominal exchange rate is determined. So it is equal to the real exchange rate times the country's price level relative to the foreign price level. So we said that nominal exchange rate is determined with the help of country's real exchange rate, and will take times the country's price level and the foreign price level, right? So it is equal to the ratio of the domestic price level and the international price level. Now for a given value of real exchange rate, if real, as we know that in the long run real variables are given, so the percentage change in nominal exchange rate equals to the difference between the inflation rate in the domestic country and the inflation rate in the foreign country, right? So we can say that the growth rate of nominal exchange rate depends on the inflation rate in the country as well as inflation rate in the foreign country. So this is how we can determine the nominal exchange rate with the help of inflation rate in both of the countries, in domestic country as well as in the foreign country. Now we'll move towards today's lecture. So what we are going to learn now in the today's lecture, so we'll talk about the short-run fluctuation in the economy. And as we know that so far we have talked about the fluctuation in the economy in the long run, right? Now how these short-run fluctuations are different from the long-run fluctuations. So economists have used different models to explain these short-run fluctuations, but most of the economists used the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model to explain the short run fluctuations in the economy. तो जो थोड़े अरसे के लिए तब्दीली आती है इकोनॉमी में, शॉर्ट रन के लिए जो तब्दीली आती है, बहुत सारे इकोनॉमिस्ट ने उसको कोशिश की है एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए विद द हेल्प ऑफ एग्रीगेट डिमांड एंड एग्रीगेट सप्लाई. The outline of today's lecture, first of all, we'll talk about the fluctuations, short-run fluctuation, what kind of fluctuations we can observe in an economy during the short run around its long-term trend, and then we'll talk about the basic model which the economists use to describe these short-run fluctuations, and at the end of the lecture we'll talk about the one side or the side of the model. We'll talk about we'll try to derive the aggregate demand curve of the economy. So this is the sequence of today's lecture. So we'll first talk about the fluctuations, then we'll talk about the model which the economists use to explain these short-run fluctuations. उसके बाद हम बात करेंगे जाके, we'll talk about the one side of the market or the model, which is where we'll talk about the aggregate demand of an economy. तो शुरू करते हैं. We'll start describing short-run fluctuations, economic fluctuations in the economy. Now, as we know that there are a lot of parameters that we talked about in the macroeconomics. We talked about inflation, we talked about GDP, we talked about real GDP. We have already talked about unemployment. So many parameters in the economy. So economy activity basically fluctuates year to year, right? So every year there is a change in different parameters in the economy. Like every year there is a different rate of growth in real GDP, there is a different rate of inflation, there is a different rate of unemployment, right? So there are a lot of fluctuations that prevail, that take place in an economy during a specific time period, which is normally a year. So in most of the years production of goods and services rises. If you compare different years of an economy, तो हम ये कह सकते हैं कि बहुत सारे सालों में goods and services की जो production है वो बढ़ती है. Now why there is a rise in the production of goods and services in different years of the economy? As we know that different factors of productions are used to produce different goods and services in the economy. Like for example, labor is one of the factors of production. The production of goods and services can rise due to increase in the labor force, right? So if the labor force in the country or in the economy increases, right, the supply of goods and services will also increase. इसी तरह से the second factor of production is the capital. So most of the countries and most of the years there is increase in capital available in the economy. तो जब capital बढ़ता है तो production of goods and services भी बढ़ जाती है. इसी तरह another factor is the natural resources. So most of the time there is increase in the natural resources, availability of natural resources in the economy. So जब natural resources बढ़ते हैं, the production of goods and services will also increase. Similarly, technological advancement or change in technology in different years can be a source of rise in the production of goods and services in different years, right? So we can say that in most years production of goods and services rises in an economy. On average, if we talk about US economy during the past 50 years, on average production in the US economy has grown by at least 3% per year, right? So this is a specific example for the United States, that in last 50 years the US output our economy output has increased, our production has increased by about 3% per year. In some years, we can say that normal growth does not occur, that cause recession, right? तो ये possibility भी होती है कि कुछ सालों में उस मुल्क की जो real GDP है, growth of output है, वो उस हिसाब से नहीं बढ़ती बल्कि कम हो जाती है। तो ये जो सूरत हाल होती है जब रियल आउटपुट कम होती है इकोनॉमी में, जब आउटपुट कम होती है तो क्या होगा, प्रोडक्शन ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज कम होगी, सप्लाई कम होती है, बहुत सारी फैक्ट्रीज क्लोज हो जाती हैं, लोग जो है अनएम्प्लॉयड हो जाते हैं, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट रेट इकोनॉमी में बढ़ जाता है, इन्फ्लेशन हो जाता है, राइट। तो बिकॉज ऑफ दीज फैक्टर्स जब आउटपुट कम होती है, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ती है, प्राइसेस बढ़ती हैं, राइट। सो दीज डिफरेंट फ्लक्चुएशन कैन कॉज रिसेशन इन द कंट्री और इन द इकोनॉमी। सो दिस इज नोन एज द रिसेशन व्हेन देयर इज fall in the growth rate of output as well as increase in unemployment rate, increase in the general price level in the economy. So this kind of situation is described as recession in the country. Now a recession is a period of declining real income, rising unemployment. So एक साइड पे हमारी real income कम होती है, दूसरी साइड पे unemployment बढ़ती है, तो इस सूरत हाल को recession का नाम दिया जाता है। Now recession is a period of declining real income and rising unemployment. Now there is another term which is called depression. So if it is mild recession, right, so if there's a small decrease in output and small rise in unemployment, that is called recession. But if it is a severe recession in the economy कि output बहुत ज़्यादा कम कर जाती है, unemployment बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ जाती है, तो that sort of situation is known as depression, right? तो recession और depression में फ़र्क ये है कि recession में output कम तो होती है लेकिन इतनी ज़्यादा कम नहीं होती, और अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट भी बढ़ती है लेकिन नॉट एज मच एज इट इज़ हार्मफुल फॉर द इकोनॉमी। दैट सिचुएशन इज नोन एज रिसेशन। बट व्हेन एवर रिसेशन बिकम सिवियर फॉर द इकोनॉमी के आउटपुट में बहुत ज़्यादा कमी आ जाती है और अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट में बहुत ज़्यादा इजाफा हो जाता है, तो इस सूरत हाल को नाम दिया जाता है डिप्रेशन का। तो दिस इज़ द डिफरेंस बिटवीन रिसेशन एंड रिसेशन। तो व्हाट वी हैव लर्नड फ्रॉम दिस स्लाइड जो कि आपको दिखाई दे रही है सामने, इसमें हमने ये सीखा कि फ्लक्चुएशंस आर देयर इन द इकोनॉमीज एंड दीज आर almost most of the time it is short run fluctuation. Every year there are fluctuations in different parameters of the country, and then we have talked about the difference between the recession and depression, right? So if it is mild fall in output and increase in unemployment, so that is recession. But if it is severe recession, larger fall in output, larger increase in unemployment rate, so that kind of situation is called depression in the economy. Now there are three key facts that need to be explained about economic fluctuations. So these are very helpful, that can tell us about economic fluctuation in the short run in an economy. Like economics, first fact that we must know that economic fluctuations are irregular and unpredictable. Second, macroeconomic variables fluctuate together. Most of the macroeconomic factors, like अगर हम unemployment की बात करें, inflation की बात करें, real output की बात करें, profit की बात करें, growth की बात करें, तो most of the parameters grow or fluctuate together. So third जो fact है about economic fluctuation is that as output falls, unemployment rises. तो जो ही output कम होती है, unemployment बढ़ जाती है। तो इन तीनों की अभी हम अलहदा से बात करते हैं। As we said that economic fluctuation are basically unpredictable and irregular, right? Economists use the term business cycle. Fluctuation in the economy are often called the business cycle. Business cycle, but this business cycle is a misleading concept because of the reason that it tells us that economic fluctuations are regular and predicted in the economy, right? So which is not the case. So business cycle is a misleading concept, and that explain the misleading concept in explaining the economic fluctuation in the country. As far as economic fluctuations are concerned, whether it is short-term fluctuation or long-term fluctuations, fluctuation in economy are irregular and unpredictable, right? Like if we, because economies has, if we talk about the growth rate of real GDP in the country or in an economy, so it has different values, it has different growth rate every year. So अगर सामने, if you look in the graph जो कि आपको नजर आ रहा है सामने, so this is a graph of real GDP of US economy. If you see that every year there is a fluctuation, there is a change in the value of real GDP, right, in the economy, right? So we have a different level of GDP, real GDP in the country. Similarly, ये जो आपको red line नजर आ रही हैं, blocks नजर आ रहे हैं, these are the period of recession in the US economy, right? अगर आप देखें तो these recession आप एक दूसरे करीब नहीं है. So most of the recessions are have occurred in different time periods. So that tells us that in most of the time economy is stable and there is an increase in the real GDP of the US economy. Production of goods and services are rising due to the available more factors of production like labor, capital, and then natural resources and technological advancement. So we can say that economic fluctuations are irregular and unpredictable. You can't predict the economic fluctuation. आप ये नहीं कह सकते. You can estimate, you can say that कि इतनी growth rate होगी, इतनी हमारी inflation होगी, इतनी unemployment होगी, but the actual, when you basically measure the real GDP growth rate at the end of the country and actual unemployment or poverty and something, so that must that is always different from the expected or the predicted. So economics fluctuations are irregular, unpredictable, right? Because you know it depends on different factors inside the country as well as between the countries also. So we cannot predict what is going to happen and to the GDP of the country, inflation in the economy, right? So most of the economic fluctuation changes in the economy are irregular and unpredictable. Second, हमने बात की, most of the economic variables fluctuates together. They fluctuate together. Like most economic variables that measure some type of income or production fluctuate closely together. Although many macroeconomic variables fluctuates together, they fluctuate by different amounts. Like for example, when we say that कि किसी मुल्क की GDP जो है इस साल कम होगी, the growth in real GDP is less, right? So how it affects? तो जब growth rate of real GDP कम होती है तो this can affect the employment level in the economy. Employment को affect करती है, prices को affect करती है, इसी तरह और बहुत सारे पैरामीटर को affect करेगी, right? तो हम ये कहते हैं कि whenever there is a fluctuation in one of the parameter, in one of the variable in the economy, macroeconomic variable in the economy, तो दूसरे variable भी उसके साथ साथ move करते हैं. उस money supply में change आती है, एग्रीगेट डिमांड में चेंज आएगी, एग्रीगेट सप्लाई में चेंज आएगी, राइट? पॉवर्टी में, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट में, लेबर फोर्स में. So we can say that most of the fluctuation in macroeconomic variable में जब आती है तो ये जो fluctuation है इकट्ठी together होते हैं, बहुत से variable इकट्ठे move करते हैं, not के different timings में. It is, yes, of course different, the fluctuation may be vary or different in amounts and quantity, but most of the macroeconomic variable की अगर हम बात करें तो they fluctuate together in case of any fluctuation in the economy. The third fact है about the economic fluctuation in the short run, so that is the investment spending. Third fluctuation, this is again another graph, the previous graph, this is again the second basically graph. This is the second fact जिसकी हमने बात की कि जो macroeconomic variable हैं इकट्ठे ही fluctuate करते हैं. अगर यहाँ पे देखें, if we talk about investment spending, are basically this graph, जो line है green line, ये आपको बता रही है कि different timings में कितनी जो है इन्वेस्टमेंट पे खर्च किया जाता है इन यूएस इकोनॉमी, एंड these shows basically the period of different recessions, when the investment is going down, आउटपुट के कम होने से आपने पिछले ग्राफ में देखा कि आउटपुट डिफरेंट पीरियड्स में कम हुई, तो उन पीरियड्स में आप देखें कि इन्वेस्टमेंट स्पेंडिंग भी कम हो रही है कॉरस्पॉन्डेंटली, राइट. सो मोस्ट ऑफ द वेरिएबल्स, मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक वेरिएबल्स मूव्स are together when they fluctuate and when there is a fluctuation in the economy. The third factor जिसकी हम बात कर रहे हैं, थर्ड फैक्ट की जिसकी हम बात करें, हमने ये कहा कि एज आउटपुट फॉल्स, जो ही आउटपुट में कमी वाक़ होती है, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट राइज कर जाती है, राइट. तो हाउ वी कैन एक्सप्लेन दिस फिनोमेना दैट आउटपुट की कमी के साथ किस तरह से अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ जाती है. देखें, whenever there is a decrease in the production of goods and services in the economy, तो रियल GDP में कमी वाक़ होती है. प्रोडक्शन में कमी क्यों आती है? बिकॉज ऑफ द it could be because of the availability of the factors of the production, or the ability of the government or the economy to produce those goods and services is not up to the mark. Like labor is not available most of the time, required or skilled labor. कैपिटल उतना ज़्यादा अवेलेबल नहीं है चीज़ों को प्रोड्यूस, टेक्नोलॉजी या लेटेस्ट यूज़ नहीं की जाती, नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज में जो ग्रोथ रेट होती है. सो देयर आर डिफरेंट फैक्टर्स, सो दैट कुड बिकम काज ऑफ फॉल इन द आउटपुट इन द इकोनॉमी. तो जब आउटपुट कम होती है तो नेचुरली प्रोडक्शन ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज कम होती है, प्रोडक्शन कम होती है, सप्लाई कम होती है, तो लोग जो है कम हायर किए जाते हैं. सो मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल हु ऑलरेडी वर्किंग दे आर लेड ऑफ फ्रॉम द एम्प्लॉयमेंट, राइट. तो उनकी नौकरियां ख़त्म हो जाती हैं क्योंकि दे फर्म्स आर प्रोड्यूसिंग लेस, दे हैव टू सप्लाई लेस इन द मार्केट, राइट. तो जब वो कम सप्लाई करते हैं, कम प्रोडक्शन करते हैं, तो नेचुरली अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ना शुरू हो जाती है, राइट. सो मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम दिस हैपन्स दैट these two parameters, that in fall in output leads to increase in unemployment. Most of the time this situation occurs in the time of recession, right. So recession जब होता है तो आउटपुट कम होती है, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ जाती है. So changes in real GDP are inversely related to change in unemployment rate. So during the time of recession, unemployment rises सब्सटेंशली. तो जब हम कहते हैं कि रिसेशन इकोनॉमी में हो रहा है, रिसेशन की वजह से प्राइसेस बढ़ती हैं, आउटपुट कम होती है, आउटपुट कम होती है. जब आउटपुट कम होती है तो प्राइसेस चीज़ों की बढ़ जाती हैं, फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन एक्सपेंसिव हो जाते हैं, राइट. सो द फर्म हैज़ टू प्रोड्यूस लेस, यूज लेस फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन इन द प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस, सप्लाई कम, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ जाती है, राइट. सो द थर्ड फैक्ट है इकोनॉमिक फ्लक्चुएशंस का, दैट इज़ अबाउट एज आउटपुट फॉल्स अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ जाती है. तो तीन हमने फैक्ट्स की बात की व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इकोनॉमिक फ्लक्चुएशन. तो वी हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट थ्री काइंड्स ऑफ फैक्ट्स अबाउट द इकोनॉमिक फ्लक्चुएशन इन द इकोनॉमी. फर्स्ट, जब हमने बात की हमने ये कहा, the first fact that we talked about that was regarding the economic fluctuations are unpredictable and irregular, right. So we can't expect what will happen to the growth rate of GDP or growth rate of prices and so on. They are very unpredictable, very irregular. दूसरी जो हमने बात की economic fluctuation में, we talked about that most of the fluctuation, whenever economic fluctuation there in the economy, most of the macroeconomic variables fluctuates together. अगर for example आउटपुट में तब्दीली आती है तो उसके साथ और बहुत सारे फैक्टर एसोसिएटेड होते हैं जिनमें तब्दीली आती है. लाइक अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट में तब्दीली आ जाती है, इन्फ्लेशन में तब्दीली आ जाती है, पॉवर्टी में तब्दीली आ जाती है, राइट. तो मोस्ट ऑफ द मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक वेरिएबल्स फ्लक्चुएट और मूव टुगेदर इन द इकोनॉमी. तीसरे जो हमने बात की फैक्ट की इन केस ऑफ इकोनॉमिक फ्लक्चुएशन, हमने ये कहा कि जैसे आउटपुट कम होती है, व्हेनेवर देयर इज अ डिक्रीज इन द आउटपुट लेवल इन द इकोनॉमी, तो उससे क्या होता है, आउटपुट जब कम होती है तो अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट राइज करता. तो दीज आर थ्री फैक्ट्स दैट वन हैज़ टू कीप इन माइंड व्हेन वी आर एक्सप्लेनिंग इकोनॉमिक फ्लक्चुएशन इन द शॉर्ट रन इन एन इकोनॉमी. सो यहाँ पे इस डायग्राम में हमने कोशिश की है, वी हैव शोन यू द परसेंटेज ऑफ लेबर फोर्स एंड देन डिफरेंट ईयर्स. तो यू कैन सी कि जो अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट रेट में फ्लक्चुएशंस हैं, बहुत ज़्यादा फ्लक्चुएशंस हैं, कभी बहुत ज़्यादा कमी वाक़ हो जाती है, कभी बहुत ज़्यादा इजाफा हो जाता है. सो इट वेरीज इन एवरी ईयर. सो जो आपके पास रेड लाइन में, पिंक लाइन में, पिंक जो आपको चार्ट बार्स नज़र आ रहे हैं, दैट एक्सप्लेन द बूम रिसेशंस इन द इकानमी, कि जब अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट कम होती है तो व्हाट इज़ हैपनिंग इन द इकानमी. अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट रेट ऑफ कोर्स वहाँ पे बहुत ज़्यादा कम बढ़ जाता है, राइट. तो आप देखें कि सो दिस ग्राफ बेसिकली हमें ये बता रहा है कि changes in different economics parameters, macroeconomic parameters are irregular and unpredictable. It can go up, it can go down. It depends on the situation or state of affair of the economy. So far we have talked about the fluctuation and talked about the facts that one has to keep in mind while explaining the short-term fluctuations in the economy. Now we'll continue with this, how the short-run fluctuations are different from the long-run fluctuation. तो इस स्लाइड में हम बात करेंगे किस तरह से हम इनको डिफ्रेंशिएट कर सकते हैं, दोनों तरह की फ्लक्चुएशंस को. मोस्ट ऑफ द इकोनॉमिस्ट बिलीव दैट क्लासिकल थ्योरी डिस्क्राइब द वर्ल्ड इन द लॉन्ग रन बट नॉट इन द शॉर्ट रन. तो यहाँ पे हम बात करेंगे क्लासिकल स्कूल ऑफ थॉट. There are some economists who said that we cannot analyze the real variable and the nominal variable together. The effect of money supply is neutral in the long run, right? So change in money supply affect nominal variable but not real variable in the long run. तो long run की जब आप बात करते हैं तो classical theory basically is about the long run. So they said that so the effect of money supply growth rate or change in money supply affect the nominal variable in the long run. It does not affect the real variable in the long run. So the assumption of money neutrality is not appropriate when studying year to year changes in the economy. जब आप short run fluctuation की बात करते हैं तो money supply is neutral. It does not explain those fluctuation properly, right? तो classical economists ये कहते हैं कि money is neutral in the short run, in the long run, and it does not explain the effect year to year changes in the economy in the short run. Two variables are used to develop a model to analyze the short run fluctuation. Now different economists, most of the economists believes are they explain the short run fluctuations with the help of aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve, right? With the help of aggregate demand concept and aggregate supply concept. And for that purpose, most of the economists, they use two variables. Like on one side they use the real GDP or the real output in the economy. On the other side they use the inflation or the price level. So if we talk about real GDP, the GDP is the real variable and price is the nominal. So most of the economists say that we can combine the nominal variable and the real variables together. लेकिन classical economists ये कहते हैं कि you can't combine the real variable with the nominal variable. They can't move together or in the same together or in the same at the same time. But most of the economists who said that, who believe that fluctuations can be explained with the help of aggregate demand and aggregate supply, they said that we can use the nominal and real variable together, right? So here in this model which we are going to explain, we'll try to explain the economics fluctuation with the help of model जो कि हम use कर रहे हैं, जिससे हम explain करेंगे कि how short run fluctuation can affect different economic parameters. तो जो मॉडल हम यूज़ कर रहे हैं उसमें हम कंबाइन कर रहे हैं दो वेरिएबल्स को, जो कि एक रियल वेरिएबल है और दूसरा nominal variable है. And the real variable is the real GDP output, real GDP in the economy, and the nominal variable is the price level or the inflation rate in the economy. The basic model of economic fluctuation, है जैसा कि हमने कहा, the most of the economists use aggregate demand and aggregate supply to explain the economic fluctuation, short-term economic fluctuation in the economy. So economists use this model of aggregate demand and aggregate supply to explain the short-term fluctuation in economic activity around its long run trend. So aggregate demand curve shows that the goods and services, the quantity of goods and services that household, firms and the government want to buy at each price level. Now यहाँ पे हम जैसा कि हमने सीखा था इन चैप्टर 3, चैप्टर 4 में हमने बात की थी क्वांटिटी डिमांड की, क्वांटिटी सप्लाई की. सो दैट क्वांटिटी वाज अबाउट, जब हमने माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स में जब हमने पढ़ा इन द पोर्शन ऑफ माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स, हमने जब डिमांड की बात की तो दैट डिमांड वाज अबाउट ए पर्टिकुलर प्रोडक्ट. Like if we talk about ice cream, so demand of one product or the quantity of one product demanded is known as the quantity demand of a product in the microeconomics. तो aggregate demand को जब उसके साथ compare करेंगे, aggregate demand is the demand of multiple products by the firms, by the households, by the government, right? So this is how we can differentiate the quantity, individual quantity demand, जो कि हमने micro में हमने बात की, और macro में जब हम बात करें तो we are talking about the aggregate demand as a whole. Now aggregate demand basically is the demand of different products by households, by firms and government who buy different goods, who demand different goods and services at each price level. Similarly, when we talk about aggregate supply, so aggregate supply is different from the individual supply जिसकी हमने chapter 3 में बात की थी, and that was a supply of about one particular product, and this here we talk about aggregate supply, the supply of different goods by different firms, by the government in the economy. So the aggregate supply curve shows the quantity of goods and services that the firms choose to produce and sell each price level, at each price level, sell at each price level. So the aggregate demand is the quantity of goods and services demanded by households, by firms, governments at different price level, and the aggregate supply is the quantity of goods and services that is supplied by the firms supplied by the firms at different price level in the economy. So this is how we can compare the individual demand and supply with the aggregate demand and aggregate supply in the economy. तो यहाँ पे हम we use this concept of aggregate demand and aggregate supply, और एक model के ज़रिए we'll try to explain and the short-run fluctuation in the economy with the help of this concept of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. If you look in this diagram, so we have two curves. One is the aggregate demand curve. As we know that aggregate demand curve is negatively sloped because there is an inverse relationship between the price of different products with its quantity demand, whether it is individual demand, whether it is aggregate demand, right? So prices are inversely related with the quantity demand or the output, quantity of output produced and supplied in the economy. And in the short run, we have a positively sloped supply curve that tells us that the output or the quantity of output produced and supplied in the economy has a positive relationship with the price of different products. Whenever there is an increase in the price of the product, the quantity of output produced and supplied in the economy will go up, and if price goes down, quantity of output produced and supplied will go down. So we have a positively sloped aggregate supply curve. Now the equilibrium in this market, or the equilibrium level of Basically, the objective is to determine the equilibrium price level and the equilibrium level of output produced and supplied in the economy, and it is that point where both of these two curves are intersecting each other, or we can say that where aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply. So that is the point where the market is in equilibrium, or the economy. यहाँ पे market की नहीं बात करेंगे, we will talk about economy, because we are explaining here we are using aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So economy is at equilibrium where aggregate demand curve intersect aggregate supply curve, right? So if we look in this diagram, so both of these two curves are intersecting at a point which is suppose a point E, right? So at E हम ये कह सकते हैं aggregate demand in the economy is equal to the aggregate supply in the economy, and this is the equilibrium level of prices in the economy and equilibrium level of output produced and supply in the economy. And now we'll try to explain the aggregate demand curve, how we determine aggregate demand. As we know that there are four components of GDP, or Y, or the contribute to the aggregate demand for goods and services. We can say that the output produced in the economy is the aggregate demand, produced and demanded, and is the basically aggregate demand in the economy. And as we know that there are four components which actually determines aggregate demand in the economy, which can produce the quantity of goods and services which are demanded in the economy, right? So we can as we know that we have the income identity, GDP जिससे हमने identity कह सकते हैं, Y is equal to C plus I plus G plus NX, where as we know that Y is the income, real income, GDP of the country, of the economy, output produced and demanded, and C is the consumption, I is the investment, G is the government spending, and NX is the difference between net exports of a country. Now with the help of this equation we can draw the aggregate demand curve, and as we know that we have two axes in each graph. So here again we have two axes. Y-axis we are measuring price level, on x-axis we are measuring quantity of output demanded. We have a demand curve, we have a price level P1. At P1 we have a output quantity, output demanded is Y1. Now suppose if prices there is decrease in the general price level in the economy, so what will happen to the quantity demand or aggregate demand of the economy? So the increase in the quantity of goods and services demanded will increase from Y1 to Y2. तो जब price में कमी आई P1 से P2 में, तो हमारे पास output बढ़ गई from Y1 to Y2. So when the price is P1, we have a correspond to this level of prices, we have a level of output, or the level of goods and services demanded in the society by the society, which is Y1. So we got a point, let us say इसको कोई नाम दे देते हैं, we got a point. Now from with the combination of P1 and Y1 we have a point A, let us say, right? So as we said that if there is a decrease in the general price level in the economy from P1 to P2, so this will help to increase the level of output in the economy from Y1 to Y2. Now at P2 and Y2 we have another combination of these two parameters, and the combination is known as अगर इसको आप denote करें point B से. Now if we combine or joined these two point A and B, we get the aggregate demand curve of the economy. Aggregate demand curve, as you can see, that is a downward sloping demand curve from upward to downward, or we can say that that there is an inverse relationship between the price level in the economy and the quantity demand of goods and services in the economy, right? So aggregate demand और जो prices का ताल्लुक है आपस में relationship है वो as inverse relationship, as we have studied the relationship between price of a product with its demand, right? So similarly जब economy की आप बात करते हैं माइक्रो से मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स की जब हम बात करते हैं, सो विल टॉक अबाउट द होल इकोनॉमी एंड देन विल टॉक अबाउट द एग्रीगेट डिमांड। तो उसमें भी जब इकोनॉमी की बात करते हैं तो एग्रीगेट डिमांड का प्राइसेस के साथ इनवर्स रिलेशनशिप होता है। दैट्स व्हाई वी हैव डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग aggregate demand curve in the economy. Now, why aggregate demand curve is downward sloping? Why it comes down from top to down, right? So there are different factors, different reasons, and that can be useful, and that can help us to explain the reason of aggregate demand curve, downward aggregate demand curve. Now there are three factors that can explain the fall of demand curve from top to down, from upward to downward. Or we can say that there are three reasons so that explain the demand curve, why aggregate demand curve is downward sloping. One is the price level and consumption. So this is known as the wealth effect. Second is the price level and the investment. This is known as the interest rate effect. The third is the price level and the net export. This is known as the real exchange effect. So there are three effects that can explain the phenomena of downward sloping demand curve. One is the wealth effect, second is the interest rate effect, third is the exchange rate effect. Now we'll try to explain one by one. तीनों इफेक्ट्स की हम बात करेंगे, तीनों को देखेंगे कि किस तरह से तीनों जो हैं डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग डिमांड कर्व को एक्सप्लेन करते हैं कि this because of this reason we can say that the demand curve is downward sloping. So first of all we'll talk about the price level and the consumption, which is the wealth effect. Now a decrease in the price level, basically whenever there's decrease in the price level in the economy, that makes consumer feel more the real income or the purchasing power of the consumer will go up. तो जब prices कम होती हैं तो the real income of the consumer will go up, the consumer will become comparatively wealthier, or they have more income, or their purchasing power has increased, which in turn encourage them to buy more and goods and services. So whenever goods and services, when they buy more goods and services, this increase their spending on goods and services, right? So when the spending of consumer increases on goods and services, this leads to the greater or larger demand of goods and services in the economy. तो हमने ये देखा कि जब प्राइस कम हुई, right, so whenever there's decrease in the price of the product, so this makes the consumer more wealthier, or the real income or the purchasing power of the consumers increases. So when the purchasing power of the consumer increases, they start demanding or buying more goods and services. They spend more on buying goods and services, and which basically in turn it means that the demand of goods and services increases, right? So this price effect, price relationship between price and consumption, price and spending, which is known as the wealth effect, actually the change in price level basically affects the wealth of or the purchasing power of the consumer, and vice versa. अगर हम ये बात करते हैं कि prices अगर चीज़ों की जब बढ़ती हैं, जब price बढ़ेगी तो what will happen to the real income of the consumer? तो price के बढ़ने से उसकी real income कम हो जाती है. जब real income कम होगी तो क्या होगा? They will buy less, purchase less goods and services, right? Their spending on goods and services will go down. So with the decrease in spending on goods and services means the quantity demanded of goods and services decreases. They demand less quantity of goods and services with the increase in the price level in the economy. So we can say that one of the reason of downward sloping demand curve is the price level and consumption, which is known as the wealth effect, right? So we have discussed that कि prices के कम या ज़्यादा होने से consumer की जो purchasing power है वो कम या ज़्यादा हो जाती है, and that affect the wealth of the consumers, तो उनकी wealth purchasing power को affect कर सकती है, and this explain the downward sloping demand curve of the aggregate demand. Now the second is the price level and the investment effect. The second factor है so that explain the downward sloping demand curve of the economy, and that is the price level and the investment. So how we can relate prices with investment? Now suppose a lower prices level reduces the interest rate in the economy, which in turn encourages greater spending on investment goods. This increase in investment spending means a larger quantity of goods and services demanded, right? How this happens? इसको कोशिश करते हैं एक्सप्लेन करने की कि किस तरह से लोअर प्राइस लेवल से इंटरेस्ट रेट में कमी आती है और इन्वेस्टमेंट बढ़ती है और लार्जर क्वांटिटी ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज डिमांड होती है. सो वी स्टार्ट विद द डिक्रीज इन प्राइस लेवल. तो जब प्राइस लेवल में कमी वाक़ होती है, लोग हैं they will demand less money, they hold less money with themselves for buying goods and services. तो जब prices कम होती हैं तो उनकी परचेजिंग पावर बढ़ जाती है, तो वो कम पैसों से ज़्यादा चीज़ें खरीद सकते हैं. They will try to hold less money, or they will demand less money with themselves, and then what they will do that with the remaining money, they will invest that money in purchasing interest, like they can purchase bond, or they can deposit their money in the saving accounts, right? तो जब बैंक्स के पास पैसे आते हैं, when they got more money with them, तो what they will do that they would like to encourage investors in the economy by reducing the interest rate in the country, right? So they reduce interest rate, there is fall in the interest rate by the banks. जब interest rate कम होता है, the objective is to encourage investors to give more money to more loans to the individual, to the firms, so that investment spending can increase, right? So जब interest rate कम होगा, so there is incentive for the firm producer to buy or to get loan from the bank and spend on investment or increase investment spending. So with the increase in investment spending, so what will happen? So the demand for goods and services will increase, right? So this is how we can say, and this effect is known as the interest rate effect. So we started from the price level, how price level, the change in price level can affect the investment in the economy. तो हमने ये देखा कि जब प्राइसेस में कमी वाक़ आती है तो उससे इंटरेस्ट रेट कम होता है. प्राइसेस में कमी से इंटरेस्ट रेट कैसे कम होता है? प्राइसेस में कमी से लोगों की परचेजिंग पावर बढ़ती है, एंड दे होल्ड लेस मनी विद देमसेल्फ, द डिमांड फॉर मनी गोज डाउन, and they will try to buy interest bearing assets like bonds, or they will try, or the people will try to deposit money in the saving accounts. तो वो saving account में अपना पैसा जमा करवा देते हैं, right? So जब banks के पास पैसा आता है तो they will like to encourage people to take loan from their bank. How they can do that? By lowering the interest rate. जब interest rate कम करते हैं, what will happen to the investment spending? There is incentive for the individual, for the firms to get loan from the bank and spend on investment, right? तो investment spending बढ़ जाती है. Investment जब बढ़ती है तो production of goods and services बढ़ेगी, और there will be increase in demand of goods and services with the decrease in price of goods and services in the economy. So this effect, this could be a reason of, we can say that because of this reason कि जब price में कमी हुई तो there is increase in the demand of quantity demand of goods and services in the economy. This could be one of the reason of downward sloping demand curve. तो दूसरा जो effect, दूसरा जो reason हमने बात की, that is the interest rate effect. Interest rate can affect the quantity demand of goods and services in the economy, and this way we can explain the downward sloping of the demand curve, aggregate demand curve in the economy. The third effect जिसकी हम बात करेंगे, जो तीसरा effect है जो कि explain करता है downward sloping demand curve के phenomena को, that is the price level and the net export. This effect is known as the exchange rate. Now how prices and net exports are related, and how this exchange rate effect can increase or decrease the quantity demand of goods and services in the economy, तो उसको हम explain करेंगे. जब हम ये कहते हैं कि suppose there is a fall in the US price level, US में या किसी इकानमी में prices में कमी वाक़ होती है, what will happen? This causes interest rate to fall. जैसे कि हमने अभी देखा कि जब भी किसी मुल्क में प्राइसेस में कमी वाक़ आती है तो इंटरेस्ट रेट कम होता है. इंटरेस्ट रेट जब कम होता है तो रियल एक्सचेंज रेट जो है डेप्रिशिएट होता है, राइट. सो व्हेन रियल एक्सचेंज रेट डेप्रिशिएटेड, व्हाट विल हैपन? व्हिच स्टिमुलेट्स द कंट्रीज एक्सपोर्ट्स. उससे कंट्रीज की एक्सपोर्ट्स को स्टिमुलेशन होती है. स्टिमुलेट मीन बढ़ती हैं, कंट्री की एक्सपोर्ट बढ़ती हैं. जब कंट्री की एक्सपोर्ट्स बढ़ेंगी तो नेचुरली क्या होगा? नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स जो हैं वो ज़्यादा होंगी. स्पेंडिंग ऑन नेट एक्सपोर्ट ज़्यादा, यानी एक्सपोर्ट्स पे ज़्यादा खर्च किया जाएगा, इंपोर्ट्स पे कम खर्च किया जाएगा. ऑन द प्रोडक्शन ऑफ एक्सपोर्ट दे विल स्पेंड मोर मनी, मोर इन्वेस्टमेंट एंड लेस ऑन इंपोर्ट्स. मीन्स this will help to increase the quantity demand of goods and services in the economy. This effect is known as the real exchange effect. तो हमने ये कहा कि जब प्राइसेस में कमी वाक़ आती है किसी भी इकानमी में तो उससे इंटरेस्ट रेट में कमी वाक़ आती है. जब इंटरेस्ट रेट कम होता है तो उससे जो एक्सचेंज रेट है उस मुल्क का वो डेप्रिशिएट होता है, राइट. जब एक्सचेंज रेट डेप्रिशिएट होता है, व्हेन एक्सचेंज रेट डेप्रिशिएट्स, सो व्हाट इज़ गोइंग टू हैपन? उस मुल्क की एक्सपोर्ट्स जो हैं वो सस्ती हो जाती हैं. जब उसकी एक्सपोर्ट्स सस्ती होती हैं तो व्हाट विल हैपन टू दी नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स ऑफ दैट इकानमी? उसकी नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स बढ़ जाती हैं, राइट. जब नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स बढ़ती हैं तो डोमेस्टिकली उसकी जो डिमांड फॉर गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज है वो बढ़ जाती है, राइट. तो जब डिमांड फॉर गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज बढ़ेगी, प्राइस में इनिशियली हमने कम किया, तो दिस फिलॉसफी, दिस फिनोमेना, दिस इफेक्ट explains the downward sloping demand curve of the economy, right. सो अब तीन फैक्ट्स की हमने बात की, तीन इफेक्ट्स की हमने बात की. हमने ये कहा कि तीन फैक्टर्स हैं जो कि एक्सप्लेन करते हैं डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग डिमांड कर्व को. कौन कौन से हैं? हमने कहा वन इज़ द प्राइस लेवल एंड कंजम्पशन, दैट इज़ नोन एज द वेल्थ इफेक्ट. हमने ये कहा कि जब प्राइस में कमी वाक़ आती है तो रियल इनकम आप कंज्यूमर्स की बढ़ जाती है. जब रियल इनकम बढ़ती है नेचुरली दे विल बाय मोर, दे स्पेंड मोर ऑन बाइंग गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, राइट. सो which in turn increase the quantity demand of goods and services in the economy. So this is known as the wealth effect, and because of this reason we can say that the demand curve or the aggregate demand curve of the economy is downward sloping. जो दूसरे इफेक्ट की हमने बात की, that is the price level and investment, and that is the interest rate effect. हमने ये कहा कि जब प्राइसेस में किसी इकोनॉमी, किसी कंट्री में प्राइस में फॉल करती है, कम होती है, तो इंटरेस्ट रेट कम होता है. जब इंटरेस्ट रेट कम होता है तो देयर इज इंसेंटिव फॉर द प्रोड्यूसर, फॉर द फर्म्स टू गेट लोन फ्रॉम द बैंक, राइट. तो दे विल इंक्रीज देयर इन्वेस्टमेंट स्पेंडिंग. सो दिस विल इन टर्न increase the demand of goods and services in the economy. So that is known as the interest rate effect. कि इंटरेस्ट रेट की कमी की वजह से जो क्वांटिटी डिमांड में तब्दीली आई है, तो इसको हम कह सकते हैं, दिस कुड बी वन ऑफ द रीजन विच एक्सप्लेन द डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग डिमांड कर्व. द थर्ड फैक्टर, जिसकी हमने बात की, थर्ड इफेक्ट की बात की, दैट इज एक्सचेंज रेट इफेक्ट. हमने ये कहा कि जब प्राइसेस में किसी मुल्क में कमी वाक़ आती है तो क्या होता है? इंटरेस्ट रेट में कमी आती है. इंटरेस्ट रेट जब कम होता है तो रियल एक्सचेंज रेट डेप्रिशिएट करता है. जब रियल एक्सचेंज रेट डेप्रिशिएट करता है तो आपकी जो एक्सपोर्ट्स हैं वो सस्ती हो जाती हैं एज कम्पेयर टू इम्पोर्ट्स, तो योर नेट एक्सपोर्ट गोज अप. जब नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स बढ़ती हैं, द क्वांटिटी डिमांड फॉर गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज है इन द इकोनॉमी, वो उनमें इजाफा हो जाता है, उनमें वो बढ़ जाती हैं, राइट. तो प्राइस की कमी वजह से क्वांटिटी डिमांड जो है किसी मुल्क में बढ़ जाती है, एंड दिस इज नोन एज द वन ऑफ द रीजन ऑफ डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग डिमांड कर्व. The downward sloping of aggregate demand curve shows that a fall in the price level raises the overall quantity of goods and services demanded in the economy. So many other factors can also contribute toward this relationship, like affect the quantity of goods and services demanded at any given price level. So अभी जो हमने बात की, we have talked about three main effects: wealth effect, interest rate effect, and the exchange rate effect. But there are some other factors that can also affect the aggregate demand of the economy in the economy. तो वो कौन से फैक्टर्स हैं उनकी अब हम अभी बात करेंगे जिनकी वजह से एग्रीगेट डिमांड में तब्दीली आ सकती है और जो एग्रीगेट डिमांड कर्व है अपवर्ड या डाउनवर्ड शिफ्ट हो सकता है. Now those factors are that can become a cause or of increase and decrease in aggregate demand or shift in the aggregate demand curve, and those factors are consumption, investment, and government purchases and the net exports of the economy. So we'll see one by one how consumption can change the shift the aggregate demand curve. As we know that consumption is the spending on buying goods and services, right? So whenever there is increase in the consumption of goods and services, it could be due to any factor like due to the decrease in the price of goods. जब चीज़ों की प्राइस में कमी वाक़ आती तो लोगों की कंजम्पशन बढ़ जाती. Or you can say that people are becoming rich and there is increase in the income level of the people. Per capita income जब इकोनॉमी बढ़ती है due to increase in GDP or growth rate of GDP, तो per capita income जब बढ़ती है तो लोगों की कंजम्पशन बढ़. So it change whenever in consumption changes due to any factor or any reason or prices or income के बढ़ने से, तो कंजम्पशन में जब तब्दीली आती है तो naturally there is greater demand. There is change in the demand of goods and services. अगर consumption बढ़ती है तो there is a positive effect of it has a positive effect on the change in demand of goods and services. Consumption के बढ़ने से there is increase in the demand of goods and services. अब consumption कम होती है तो there will be decrease in the demand of goods and services. तो जब consumption के बढ़ने से aggregate demand बढ़ती है economy में, तो aggregate demand का वो rightward shift हो जाता है, right? Similarly with the decrease in consumption due to any reason, due to increase in prices or due to decrease in per capita income and so on, जब consumption कम होती है तो consumption की कमी की वजह से demand curve downward shift हो जाता है. So this is one of the factors that can shift the aggregate demand curve of the economy upward or downward. Similarly, other factors that can shift or change the aggregate demand in the economy, that is the investment, right? Investment is another factor so that can increase the quantity demand of goods and services in the economy or decrease the quantity demand of goods and services in the economy. Now if the government encourage investment by reducing the interest rate in the economy, right? So the spending on investment will increase. जब spending on investment increase है तो there is increase in the production of goods and services, supply of goods and services बढ़ जाती है, right? So naturally the demand, जब supply goods are available, so जब supply बढ़ती है तो prices कम होती हैं, तो naturally the demand of goods and services will go up. So change in investment spending or by encouraging investment or by discouraging investment, investment में domestic investment की बात भी आप कर सकते हैं, foreign investment की बात कर सकते हैं, right? So whenever there is change in investment expenditure either on positive side or negative side, this affects the quantity demand of goods and services in the economy, right? Aggregate demand को affect कर सकती हैं, right? So अगर हम ये कहते हैं कि if investment goes up and investment इजाफा होता है तो aggregate demand का rightward shift होता है, और अगर हम ये कहते हैं कि इन्वेस्टमेंट में कमी वाक़ होती है तो इन्वेस्टमेंट जो एग्रीगेट डिमांड कर्व है वो डाउनवर्ड शिफ्ट होता है, राइट? तो दिस इज हाउ the investment changes in investment can affect the aggregate demand curve in the economy. Similarly, the third factor that can change or shift the aggregate demand curve upward and downward is the government purchases. अगर government की purchases, government की spending बढ़ जाती है, whether it is development expenditure or non-development expenditure, right, due to any reason, due to increase in due to budget deficit or some less revenues or increase in revenue, any factor that helps the government, that induce the government to change its expenditure, right? So whenever there is increase in expenditure of the economy, government, तो उसके demand का rightward shift होता है. जब expenditure में कमी वाक़ हो जाती है तो उसमें demand for goods and services में कमी वाक़ होती है और demand का leftward shift होता है. Similarly, the last factor is the net exports of the economy. जब net exports में इजाफा होता है, whenever there is increase in the net exports of the economy, right? So what will happen? to the demand curve of the economy, this will shift rightward. Whenever there is decrease in the net exports of the economy, the demand curve will shift inward, right? So we said that these are the four factors which can become a possible cause of the shift in the aggregate demand curve of the economy. तो उसमें हमने बात की कंजम्पशन की, कंजम्पशन के बढ़ने से या कम होने से एग्रीगेट डिमांड में शिफ्ट हो सकती है ऊपर या नीचे। उसके बाद हमने बात की इन्वेस्टमेंट स्पेंडिंग की, इन्वेस्टमेंट की तब्दीली की, तो इन्वेस्टमेंट की तब्दीली से भी डिमांड कर्व ऊपर नीचे जा सकता है। एंड देन वी हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट द गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग की बात की, जब गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग में इजाफा होता है तो डिमांड कर्व ऊपर शिफ्ट हो जाएगा, अगर कमी होती है तो डिमांड कर्व नीचे शिफ्ट आ जाएगा। तो इसमें से जब ये तब्दीली आती है, डिमांड कर्व ऊपर नीचे शिफ्ट होता है, तो इस ग्राफ में अगर आप देखें, सो व्हेन एवर देयर इज शिफ्ट इन द डिमांड कर्व ऑन द राइट साइड फ्रॉम D1 to D2, so price level remains same, right? So there is a change in the output level, that there is change in the quantity demand of output in the country, right? So because of the change in consumption, because of the change in investment, or change in government spending, government purchases, are due to change in the net exports of the economy. Whenever there is change in any of the factor, जो कि जिनकी हमने अभी बात की, this will shift the aggregate demand curve upward or leftward, and accordingly changes the level of output demanded or change in level of quantity demanded of goods and services in the economy. So this was all about today's lecture. So I will try to summarize what we have learned in today's class in few minutes. All societies, जैसा कि हमने शुरू में कहा, हमने economics fluctuation की बात की, so all societies, all countries experience short-term fluctuations around the long-term trend. जैसे कि हमने देखा कि economy, there are a lot of parameters which changes in the short run, for the short run, from when there are, in which there are changes every year in the economy, चाहे real GDP की बात करें, चाहे price level की बात करें, चाहे poverty की बात करें, चाहे unemployment की बात करें, right? So all societies experiences short run economic fluctuation around the long run trends. These fluctuations, जैसे उसके बाद हमने बात, तीन फैक्ट्स की हमने बात की। पहला जो फैक्ट था, हमने ये कहा कि ये जो इकोनॉमिक फ्लक्चुएशंस हैं, these are irregular and unpredictable, right? So you cannot predict, you cannot say that so the same trend will occur in the next coming years. So it can be any result, could be any result, whether on the higher side, on the upper side, or on the lower side. दूसरी हमने फैक्ट की बात की, हमने ये कहा कि most of the economic, macroeconomic variables or parameter move in the same direction. एक ही direction में जाते हैं, अगर so not the same direction, they move, most of the economic variable, they move together, right? अगर income में तब्दीली आती है, if there is change in the real income or the real GDP of the economy, so this can affect at the same time on the employment, this can affect on the price level in the economy, but of course by different amounts, a different quantity, right? So we can say that other fact about economic fluctuation is that whenever there is a change or one of the parameters is fluctuating in the economy, it can affect at the same time other variables of the economy as well. The third fact जिसकी हमने बात की, we said that as output falls, unemployment rises. जैसे कि output में कमी वाक़ई होती है, बहुत सारी फैक्ट्रीज बंद हो जाती हैं, जो employed लोग हैं वो they are unemployed now, they are laid off, right? So unemployment बढ़ जाती है. So then we have talked about economy. हमने एक model हमने कहा कि most of the economists believe that they use the aggregate demand and aggregate supply to explain the short-term fluctuation in the economy. Now उस model के मुताबिक हमने ये कहा कि aggregate demand and aggregate supply, the output of goods and services, the overall level of prices adjust to balance aggregate demand and aggregate supply. So price is one of the parameter which is nominal. Real GDP or the growth of output is the real variable. So price basically adjust, the prices adjust to the balance between aggregate demand and supply, and this brings equilibrium in the market, right? So at the end we have learned that the aggregate demand curve slopes, why aggregate demand curve slopes downward. So क्यों हम ये कहते हैं कि there is downward sloping aggregate demand curve? तो हमने तीन फैक्टर्स की बात की, तीन इफेक्ट्स एक्सप्लेन किया कि तीन वजूहात की वजह से, तीन चीज़ों की वजह से, तीन फैक्टर्स की वजह से aggregate demand curve is downward sloping. One is the price and consumption, that is known as the wealth effect. राइट सो जब प्राइस में कमी आती है, रियल इनकम बढ़ती है, पीपल इट मेक्स मोर वेल्दियर, और परचेजिंग पावर बढ़ती है, एंड इंक्रीज द क्वांटिटी डिमांड ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज. दूसरे जो हमने बात की फैक्टर की, दैट इफेक्ट की बात की, दैट इज इंटरेस्ट रेट इफेक्ट, कि प्राइसेस में कमी से इंटरेस्ट रेट में कमी आती है. जब इंटरेस्ट रेट में कमी आती है तो व्हाट विल हैपन, इन्वेस्टमेंट डिमांड, स्पेंडिंग ऑन इन्वेस्टमेंट बढ़ती है. जब स्पेंडिंग ऑन इन्वेस्टमेंट बढ़ती है तो दिस विल बेसिकली इन टर्न्स क्या होता है, देयर इज लार्जर demand of goods and services in the economy. जो तीसरे फैक्ट की हमने बात की, the third fact that we have talked about is the exchange rate effect, कि नेट प्राइसेस की कमी से, किसी मुल्क में प्राइस में कमी आती है तो उसकी इंटरेस्ट, वहाँ पे इंटरेस्ट रेट में कमी आती है, इंटरेस्ट में कमी से रियल एक्सचेंज रेट डेप्रिशिएट होता है. जब रियल एक्सचेंज रेट डेप्रिशिएट होता है तो व्हाट विल हैपन, उस मुल्क की एक्सपोर्ट सस्ती हो जाती हैं, इंपोर्ट्स महंगी हो जाती हैं उसके लिए, एंड देन नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स विल गो अप. जब नेट एक्सपोर्ट बढ़ती हैं तो देयर हेल्प्स दिस to increase the demand, quantity demand of goods and services in the economy. So these three factors explain and the downward sloping of aggregate demand curve, that is the wealth effect, the interest rate effect and the exchange rate. उसके बाद हमने बात की कि इन फैक्ट्स के अलावा देयर आर सर्टन फैक्टर्स दैट कैन ब्रिंग ए शिफ्ट इन द एग्रीगेट डिमांड कर्व, और वो हमने ये कहा कि देयर आर 4 पॉसिबल फैक्टर्स. जैसे कि हमें पता है कि रियल इनकम इज इक्वल टू कंजम्पशन प्लस इन्वेस्टमेंट प्लस गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग एंड नेट एक्सपोर्ट. तो इन चारों फैक्टर्स में जब तब्दीली आती है, जब बढ़ते हैं या कम होते हैं, तो दिस कैन इफेक्ट द एग्रीगेट डिमांड इन द इकोनॉमी. तो जब एग्रीगेट डिमांड बढ़ती है या कम या ज़्यादा होती है ड्यू टू इंक्रीज इन कंजम्पशन, ड्यू टू इंक्रीज इन इन्वेस्टमेंट, और ड्यू टू द गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग, और ड्यू टू द नेट एक्सपोर्ट, तो डिमांड, एग्रीगेट डिमांड का विल शिफ्ट राइटवर्ड एंड देन और एग्रीगेट, अगर इनमें कमी वाक़ई होती है तो एग्रीगेट डिमांड का शिफ्ट लेफ्टवर्ड. So this was all about today's lecture. So I will stop my lecture here today. Till the next time, students. See you. Allah Hafiz.